Okay, so I've just hit the record button, so I'm going to make a start. Welcome, everybody. I'm Julian Ingle. I am the Deputy Head of the Academic Skills Unit, and I volunteered to do this session on using Zoom for teaching. And I'm bizarrely having to do it through WebEx. That could get, hopefully it won't get messy, but I'm not a great WebEx user, nor am I a really full-on Zoom user, but I have been teaching for the last 2 months using Zoom quite regularly. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little brief outline. So why use Zoom? We're going to look at schedule. I'm assuming that you've used it maybe a little bit, but I thought I would just go through some of the basics as well, because this is just an introduction. We're going to look at scheduling and preferences, a little mention of security, and then we're going to look at the functionality, in particular breakout rooms and the non-verbal communication, annotation and whiteboard if we've got time, and then some thoughts around teaching with Zoom and how that, and some interesting things that have come out from my teaching in the last 2 months when I've been using it. And by all means, pop questions in the chat, but bear in mind that I don't have a co-facilitator, so if there's thousands of things in the chat, I might not get to them, but I'll try. So I hope that's okay. And I hope everybody can hear me clearly. If you're, I'm great. If you do get any internet surges and things like that, where the signal starts to drop out, most of you've got your video switched off, but that's the first thing that you can do is switch off your video, and that will hopefully free up a bit of bandwidth. So, as you know, there's an explosion of platforms for students to use and for us to use with our new digital world in the midst of COVID, and it is potentially very confusing for students. And often the advice is to go with what they use, but that's not going to be so easy because of things like security and there have been issues raised about Zoom and its security. I've not had a problem with it in the last 2 months or so. It has been upgraded and it has been, they have improved their security. And as Andy just said, it looks like the university is now getting a license. I've got a license already for it. And as far as I'm aware, having looked around at the different options, what I'm going to talk about today and what I'm going to explain about using Zoom doesn't make any difference whether you've got a license or not. The free version has the same amount of functionality that I'm going to be describing today in terms of using breakout rooms and stuff like that. It's more just about setting up your preferences and knowing how to use it. The only difference with the paid versions is you have a bigger number of participants, and there are other kind of conferencing functions, and I think there's other layers of support, technical support and security that kick in. But in terms of security for Zoom, on Monday was because I was running an event that had been advertised through Eventbrite. I got a random person from New York come into that. I think it's a much better Google Meet, for example. It says we're having problems connecting to the network. That's connected, which does make a difference in terms of how tired you get when you're in long meetings. So I think that is an important aspect. Its functionality, I think I'm hopefully back. Its functionality is pretty straightforward. I've not had any problems, learning it. It's fairly intuitive. Um, and as you know, it takes a lot less bandwidth than WebEx. So that I think is an advantage for students who are coming in perhaps with poor broadband, and for us when our broadband's not working as well as it could be. I found it really great for small group teaching. So by small group, I'm thinking sort of 20 to 25. Obviously, you can use it with bigger groups. I think it depends on what you want to do, what you're using it for. But mostly, I've been using it with up to about 25 people, and it's been great. So I'm just going to take you through the scheduling process. So we're going to start from the very beginning, and so there's a few things that are just worth looking at. Okay, hang on a sec. So hopefully now you can see the scheduling. I'll just move that into there. So this is the scheduling window when you go into Zoom. Fairly straightforward. I'm scrolling up and down. Hopefully you can see that. You put in your date, your time, how long you want the meeting, whether you want it to recur. The meeting ID always generate automatically. Require password, yes, for security. And then I always have the video off for the host, for me, and for the participants. Just when you're getting set up, it's just that little bit easier. And then you check the telephone and computer audio. Most of this is set in the default. And then obviously, because we're a Google University, I sync it to my Google Calendar. You have to allow it to access your Google Calendar, and then it puts the meeting into your Google Calendar, and then you can copy and paste the meeting URL and the password. Always enable waiting room. I think that's much easier, so people can come in and wait for you to admit them, and also you're aware of who's there. That gets a little bit trickier when you're running, if people are coming in late, so you do have to keep an eye out for that. That on the top right hand side, you'll see this thing saying admit. So then you just have to keep an eye out for that. I think it's always good to mute participants on entry. And then the other things I don't tend to use, and so those are basically, that includes the basic and the advanced options. So that's really it with the scheduling. I think the password thing is important, that you let most of that happen automatically. That apparently is the safest way. So that's the scheduling. So now I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to show you. So you've scheduled your meeting, but before you schedule your meeting, you need to set your preferences, because you won't automatically have breakout rooms, the annotation function, and other things already working. Okay, thank you for that. I will try and make it bigger. Samia, were you able to see what I showed you enough to make sense? I'll try it with the next one.
Yes.
Thank you, Samia. Okay. So yeah, do tell me if you need me to do anything. As I say, I'm not an expert. So now, when you're in Zoom, and it does work differently on a Mac to a PC, you go to the preferences section, and that takes you out into your account, and you do it through the web page. And it's a web-based set of preferences, and it looks a bit like this. Let's find it. Okay, here we go. So, so I'll scroll up. So this all comes into the help Center. So the Zoom Help Center is very, very good. Actually, that's the annotation tools. Let's find the, where's it gone? That's what I'm coming to later. Just a sec. Okay, so go to settings. Okay, so now I've got it. It's not letting me do that. Why isn't it doing it? Okay, now it's coming. Okay, so I'm going to try and share this window with you now. It disappeared. Okay, so this is now the settings page in Zoom, or preferences if you're using a Mac. And these are what you would typically have checked when you're going through it. So obviously requiring a password for various situations. All meetings use a PMI, a personal meeting ID. Again, if you want the waiting room function, you have to have it enabled. None of these things are enabled unless you enable them yourself. And then you choose who goes into the waiting room, embedding passwords in your invite link so that you can copy and paste that. And then scrolling down, telephone and computer audio. Again, a lot of this is repeated, enabling personal meeting ID. And this is where you decide, muting participants on entry, reminders, chat function you need enabled, private chat you need enabled so that you can speak to an individual as well as everyone. That's really useful when you're teaching. Co-hosting is important to have that option as well. If you're teaching with somebody else, if there's any problems, you can pass over the control to them. The toolbar you need to have active. Screen sharing, obviously, you need to have active. Depending on what you're doing, the screen sharing, it can be the host only, or depending on what you're doing, it can be all participants as well. And then these are some of the things that are not so obvious. So the annotation, you need that checked because there's a really useful annotation tool that you can use. There's also a whiteboard function that we'll look at very briefly that you can use. The non-verbal feedback, again, is really useful, particularly when you've got bigger groups, just for them to be able to put a thumbs up or to say yes or no by clicking makes it a lot easier. Allowing participants to rename themselves is also important because people may have different accounts, and it may be that in some meetings you want them to rename themselves with their particular department or their university, depending on what you're doing. And then the breakout room, that's the key one. That's not automatically enabled, so you will have to go through that. You can use virtual backgrounds, as you know. There is also the option to soften your image in there as well. And those are the kind of main things that you need to have. The rest are kind of up to you. I have no idea what blur snapshot on iOS task switcher is, but it's enabling things like annotations and breakout rooms. Otherwise, if you haven't got them, then you're not able to use them. So that's the settings that you need to go through. And again, you can go to the Zoom Help Center and it'll walk you through those. Okay, So I've done that. I'm going to show you now. We've done the preferences. A screenshot of basically, we're going to look at the annotations and the breakout rooms. And so I've got some screenshots I've done that show you how those work. So you've enabled them in your settings. So first of all, I think I'll show you the annotations in the whiteboard, and then we'll look at breakout rooms in a bit more detail. So annotations are basically a series of little text and drawing tools that you can use when you're screen sharing. So if you're screen sharing a text or a PowerPoint and you want to highlight and draw attention to it, you've got these annotation tools that you can use. So they look like this. Let's have a look. Other applications. Okay, where have my images gone? Just a sec while I find the pictures. Okay. I'm going to make this full screen and then share. Okay. And I'm going to make that, just close that. Oh no, it's done it again. Just do that. So I'm going to make a screen. Is that visible to everybody? No? Okay. I'm sharing Paint 3D. I should have this image of a top tips for Zoom participants. Can you see top tips for Zoom? Just a black screen. Okay, I'll try again. It's taking time to load. Sammy, I can see you. So is it loaded for you? No. Okay.
Black screen for me.
Black screen. Okay, let me try again. Okay, why is it not loading? I'm going to stop and try again.
Is it because we're not using Zoom? Maybe, I don't know.
It's just a screenshot that I took. So let me see if it will let me share this now. Minimize that. Okay. Has that come up?
Yes, that's fine.
Phew. Right, I'll make it bigger. Is that clearer? Can you see that? And is that big enough to see?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay, great. So if you've shared a screen, and it works in a very similar way to WebEx, there's a button at the bottom of the screen. It says share your screen, and you click on the either the tab or the image or whatever it is that you want to share. And if you've got annotations enabled, as we just did, you've then at the top of this screen, you can see you've got these annotation tools, and I've done a couple just to show you. So you've got a mouse, you've got select, you've got text tools, draw, all these different things. And so if you're teaching with, in this case, these are the top tips I send out to people before Zoom. You can highlight or circle and draw attention to your slides or your images. So that's a useful, very easy to use function when you're screen sharing. Similarly, I'll stop sharing that now. Of course, I'm trying to stop sharing something else. Okay. Okay. So I've stopped sharing now. Similarly, when you open the screen sharing in Zoom, you have this option called whiteboard. Whiteboard is basically, as it sounds, it's a whiteboard that everybody can draw on using those annotation tools. And I'll give you a quick screenshot. So you don't screen share anything. You just click on whiteboard, and up comes this whiteboard with the annotation tools for everybody to share. And it looks a bit like this. If it will let me share it. Hang on a sec. Okay. Yeah, there it is. So basically, and I'll expand it, you end up with a white screen, a white board. At the top, you can see all the Zoom controls. You've got mute, stop video, security, all those kinds of things. And then you've got your annotation tools. You can add text, as I've done here. You can draw, and everybody, all the participants in the Zoom chat can use this whiteboard. So depending on what you're doing and you're teaching, and if you're doing multimedia teaching, that could be very, very useful. And just writing in, even sort of shared writing activities. Okay, so that's the annotations tool and the whiteboard tool. I'm now going to stop sharing that. What I didn't mention was that, well, we'll come to it now when it comes to breakout rooms, is the extra layer of security that you use in Zoom, which is locking the meeting. And it's a bit tricky. On the security tab in Zoom at the bottom of the screen, you click on that and you get this option to lock meetings. One of the problems I found with it running classes in the last couple of months is that when you're using breakout meetings, breakout rooms, if you've locked the meeting before you start using breakout rooms, it randomly kicks people out of the breakout rooms. So it's just something to watch out for. I think there's an issue around different devices that people use. So you don't get as much functionality with tablets and phones as you do with a laptop. And that's something to really watch out for when you're running group sessions in Zoom, that you need to get a sense of what people are using, because they will Android tablets and Apple iPads function differently, and they can create these little glitches. So what I'm going to do now is, rather than explain it's not complex, explain Zoom, I'm going to show you this little video from the Zoom Help Center that walks you through the basic processes, and it covers the basics of using a breakout room. I found it. Let me just double check where it is on my browser. Okay, Zoom breakout rooms. Okay, here we go. Share. Oh, hang on a sec. that. Hang on a sec. I've just got to do this setting first. Where's it gone? Let's see what happens. It's not giving me the option to make it to optimize it for video, but I'll just see what happens when we try and share it and see if it works.
Hey everyone, Farah from Zoom here. On this brief video, we're going to show you how you can leverage our breakout room feature to take a large meeting or virtual classroom and split it up into smaller groups or sessions. You'll see that I have already enabled the breakout room feature, which you can find in your settings along the bottom. And that breakout room button will actually be right here. This is a button that only your hosts or co-hosts will be able to see. And right now we don't have a co-host in the session. If I manage my participants, I can hover over Catherine, for example, to make her a co-host. So she'll see this button now as well. When we're ready to split the group into smaller sessions, I can easily click this button to get a pop-up window asking me how many rooms I'd like to assign out and how many participants per room. For this example, it's recommending, since there are 6 people, we can split it up into 2 rooms. I can do this automatically or manually. So if we click on the automatic button, it'll generate those breakout rooms for us. Certainly, if there's anyone I want to swap out, maybe I want to move Michael to the other room, I can exchange him for a different participant. Once I'm ready to open all rooms, I'll click this Open All Rooms button, and our participants will be able to join the sessions that we've created for them. So we'll slowly see those people join. One thing that's really important to note is that as a host or a co-host, you can actually hop between the different rooms to talk to the participants. You can see here I have the join button. Now everybody's left to go to the rooms. I can broadcast a message to everybody and say, wrapping up in 1 minute. And this will broadcast the message. And then I can close the rooms, which gives them a 1-minute timer to rejoin our session. We'll give everybody a second to rejoin, and I'll show you 1 or 2 additional features with breakout rooms. There we go. We can kind of see everybody kind of popping back in. Now everybody's rejoined the main session. You'll see that I have the opportunity to reopen these rooms again, which is really great. If you have a very long session or very long virtual class, you can split into these virtual smaller groups as often as you'd like. And the additional options here will allow you to automatically close breakout rooms after a specified amount of time. You can also change the countdown timer to be 30 seconds or 2 minutes if you like. I'll show you a setting where you can also pre-assign folks to be in your breakout room before the classroom starts. You'll want to navigate over to the class that's already been created in your Zoom portal. Under the Meetings tab, you can find your meeting. Scrolling all the way to the bottom, you'll see if we open this to re-edit it, I have the opportunity to pre-assign a breakout room here. And I can create the rooms and upload a CSV with all of my participants in advance so that their names are already populated in the room when I start the session. That's basically how you can run breakout rooms. We hope you found this video helpful. If you have any additional questions, please visit us at support.zoom.us. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.
Okay. Let me just exit this. Was that okay? Were you able to follow the video? Yeah. Okay. So breakout rooms is actually very, very straightforward to use when you're in Zoom, and you know, ideally it would have been great to have run this session in Zoom, but I wasn't allowed to. One of the points that she mentioned that is really, really useful is the countdown timer. It's set it is so much easier, you're right, than WebEx breakout rooms. It's really, really great. It's automatic. It does everything for you. Set the countdown timer to 10 seconds so that the rooms close quickly, because you don't want people hanging around. Moving participants around in rooms is really straightforward. You just click on their name and it says move, and it tells you, asks you which room you want to move them to. You can move them to whichever room you like. Allocating people to rooms as well during your Zoom meeting is very, very straightforward. So the countdown is, so when you're doing your breakdown, setting up your breakdown rooms, either automatically or manually, there's a little options button, and on the options button it says countdown, and it's normally set to 60 seconds for when the rooms close. If you change that to 10, then the rooms close much faster, and so that people aren't hanging around waiting for their breakout room to close. Once it's closed, as it said, you can reopen it with the same participants, or you can change the participants. It's very straightforward. Participants in their breakout rooms can also share screens, and so that's great. So if you get them a task to do in their breakout room, they can share a screen that they're working on. The other thing about breakout rooms is that joining them as the host, you can pop in and out of them really easily. You just click on the breakout rooms, and there's an option as the host to join breakout room 1, 2, 3, or 4, and you just join in. You can pop in, pop out. It's really forward to use. The thing you've got to watch out for is obviously kind of muting and unmuting yourself in the breakout rooms, but that's just something you get used to. So, giving you this kind of whistle-stop tour, can you have a whiteboard per breakout room? I haven't tried it. I don't see why not. If you start screen sharing, I imagine you'd probably be able to pick up the whiteboard function. Yeah. Can you then share the breakout rooms? No, you can't share the breakout. The breakout rooms are kind of closed rooms. Okay. And so, I mean, I suppose if you were recording them, you might be able to share what goes on in those breakout rooms. I haven't, because I'm working with students and consent's been an issue. I haven't managed to, I haven't been allowed to record the stuff that I've been doing. Just keep pinging questions in. I saw a few. I don't know about the format of the CSV in terms of setting up the breakout rooms in advance. I haven't tended to do that. I've tended to, if I want to reorganize the breakout rooms or assign them, I tend to do it live because that's quite easy. Thinking about it generally for teaching, it does require a little bit of setting up. There's a few things that I've noticed. One, it takes a lot longer than a normal taught session. So do be prepared for things to slow down at certain times with problems of internet connections and so on. I will send you all a copy, or I will send a copy of my top tips to Andy so that you have access to that. The top tips just alert them to testing the audio, testing the video beforehand, the use of annotation tools, and the use of the non-verbal communication, and just shows them what the screen toolbar will look like. I think it's good to just alert students or participants. I don't know about the Teams versus Zoom thing. To alert participants to the problems with bandwidth in terms of, people are working from home, to just try and be as tolerant as possible of internet problems, people losing signal and so on and so forth, and interruptions. Is one participant in the breakout room assigned to be able to screen share, or they can all share? Yeah, so they can take it in turns to screen share. Do we have Zoom available to use now as staff? You have the free version, okay, where you get 40 minutes free, and it has the same amount of functionality. If you're needing to use it for longer, you just you get a countdown where it counts you out of the Zoom meeting, and you just re-click on the link again and it starts again. So actually the free thing is fine. But hopefully we will have it. So setting up the meeting with students, just make them a little bit aware of potential problems, the top tips. Etiquette is an interesting one. So to mute on entry, to mute when they're not speaking, and as I said, don't forget to mute yourself. It's possibly worth raising questions about online behaviours in terms of turn taking, raising hand and raising the hand and using non-verbal communications and chat. That can be quite frustrating. I mean, what's been interesting is that some people, and I think this is one of the interesting things about some of the teaching I've been doing, is that for some people they don't want to use video. They don't want their image to be seen. I think that's quite interesting. But what are your expectations of students' behaviours or participants' behaviours? There are some guidelines out at the moment around the university, and I've seen various things about online etiquette. So it might be worth having a look at those. But you also have to think about what are your expectations? Obviously, students sitting in bed with no shirt on, that kind of thing, and has happened, and obviously not something that we would want to encourage. But are you happy for certain students not to use the video? I think in some cases there are thinking about students with disabilities, with maybe who are on the autistic spectrum, and they don't want their video image to be broadcast. Then I don't have a problem with it myself. And on several of my sessions, people have chosen not to use their video. I think that's fine. But it is important to think about online behaviours and what your expectations are. In terms of how the sessions have gone, the feedback's been very positive. What's been really interesting is that this opportunity to run teaching in Zoom has given people who wouldn't normally be able to participate the opportunity to participate. So I had people coming who wouldn't normally be able to come to these sessions because it's done online. People who are disabled, people who have certain anxieties, people who are distance learners. All of these have had access to these sessions that they wouldn't normally have. So that side of it has been really interesting. And for many, it's really quite transformative. I think the things you could do in Zoom. Well, I mean, it's entirely kind of anything you can do in WebEx, you can do in Zoom. Would you use it for large group teaching? That's up to you. What kinds of things would you do? I mean, that's what I'm interested to hear. I mean, what kinds of teaching activities are, and I've been using them quite a lot for running writing retreats. They've been really great. But I mean, for doing kind of things like jigsaw debates, peer reviews in breakout rooms, all those kinds of things, I can imagine it working, as long as it's reasonably manageable, working very, very well. So I'm just going to go through a few of the questions. And if you've got any questions, do ping them into the chat now. Can students save the annotations on their screen? I think if it's recorded, yes. Someone's given us a sample CSV file. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the limitations of the free account is the number of participants. I think it's up to 100, and you get a 40-minute period for your Zoom meeting. But as I said, you just re-click on the link and you can go for hours and hours. So that's very straightforward. Any other questions or comments or thoughts? I know it's been quite a whistle-stop tour. If you need to look at more of the kind of the help videos, the Zoom help center has it all kind of broken down into different sections. Yes, I mean, it would have been great to practice with each other, and had I been allowed to do this in Zoom, we could have had a little play with it, and done a few things. But the good news is that Zoom is coming, so Andy said, and so as I said, I will share the Zoom tips sheet I put together, and anything else that I've used as well. So thank you very much for your time. I hope that was helpful. Good idea. I'll include the link to the Zoom video. Yeah, I think security has been a concern. I've not had any problems. I shall just wait for a little bit longer in case there's any last minute questions. I will send the top tips to Andy and he can circulate them.
Julian, thanks a lot. That was a very informative session.
Good. It was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but yeah, it was the basics.
But just we, no doubt, when we get the final approval, we will be doing lots of training on Zoom, and I think it's good news. It's a little bit less clunky than WebEx. I think it's got a bit more. I think it's slightly more intuitive to use. So yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah,
it's great. No, I found it really easy. Okay. I shall. Shall I let you close the
well, I'll just say thanks to everybody for coming. When do we know Zoom? What I understand is that the discussions around it be using TB1M. I'm not quite sure of the time frame because you know what it's like, it's contracts. But what we've heard is that it is coming and it will be in place so people can use it. But beyond that, I don't know the specifics at this point. Colleagues, thanks for all coming. I still see some familiar days. It's been a long day for Sam. You've come to an awful lot of events. I'm very grateful for your contributions and attendance to all the events we're running. It is very much appreciated. And we will see you tomorrow. So thanks again. Julian, cheers, mate. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Thanks, everybody.
I'll see you later in the week.
Yeah. Take care.